So for those of you asking, yes, I will tell you exactly what I think of it. And the truth is that I am not madly in love with it. But before the entire population of Brazil gets their pitchforks out, don't worry, I do like it. I think it's classy. It's a very fitting tribute. And it passes the test in not being overly obvious. I won't lie to you, but I was definitely expecting a nod to the McLaren liveries of the 80s and early 90s with the classic red or burnt orange motifs. But once I saw this tribute livery to Ayrton Senna on the MCL38, as well as the McLaren Senna supercar itself, which I thought was an extra little bit of icing on the cake, I realised two things. First of all, that McLaren livery, it's all very well and good and it's iconic, but it is a livery that has been seen for a very long time. It's not just unique to Monaco, it just so happened to be used at Monaco when Ayrton Senna got all of those wins. And then also, we have to look back to last year, and we did get that Triple Crown livery, which was essentially the Marlboro motif with just different colours. So to get that a second year only with red or burnt orange instead of the orange and black for the different Triple Crown liveries that McLaren had, would have probably been a little bit too, well, iterative. So therefore, I think this livery of basically using the colours of Ayrton Senna's helmet was a nice little twist that we weren't really expecting, him being effectively Mr. Monaco. And it does make me think in a way, it'd be quite poetic if either Norris or Piastri wins the Monaco Grand Prix. It'll be like Ayrton Senna's with them. A part of him has gone in to winning that Grand Prix, effectively Senna winning his 7th. This was a joint effort between McLaren and their major sponsor OKX to work together with the sponsors to work with the livery in either black or white. Except you, DP World, you decided to be different, didn't you? But hey, every party needs a pooper, that's why they invited you. I do like it, I think it's classy, I did not see it coming, and it does go down as a worthy member of the unique McLaren one-off livery club. And that render that they did of having that car in front of the tunnel with the McLaren Senna hypercar, ooh, that was simply lovely. But I'll tell you what isn't quite as lovely. That whole Andretti thing, it's still going, and it really doesn't help that one of your recent hires in Pat Simmons is somebody who was one of the technical directors of Formula One itself. That is a key indicator that things are progressing, and maybe not in Formula One management's favour. You remember that whole Andretti situation where they got Congress to wade in on all of it? Well, it's gone even further, just as I predicted, with it being referred to the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission on antitrust grounds. So effectively, Mario Andretti has managed to corral the entire US government to his side. So at this point, you may as well say, all together now, I am the Senate. So, Stefano, regarding Andretti's application into F1, you might as well do it. And for those of you not too familiar with the significance of this, that it's gone to the United States Senate, many people in the comments who are far more learned than I am, getting two senators who are effectively the opposite of one another to agree on something is quite a major blow for Formula One, who have not said a thing about this since the first news of this broke out at the start of the month. The letter clearly states that since F1 is pushing further and further onto American soil, there is a financial incentive to continue said push, but that the management are looking to insulate the existing teams and keep them away from any potential competition. In my own personal opinion, I feel like it's the teams pushing back at the management instead. Since 2009, the teams have gained far more power than they used to have when Bernie ruled with an iron fist. And really, since the last Concord Agreement, the teams have had even more power. They've now got star power. They bring value to the sport. What with Drive to Survive, they carry a lot of power because they can easily go, you know what, we're out, bye, and then they'll lose so much value, Formula One. So I think the teams carry a lot of influence. So far, the Department of Justice and Federal Trade Commission, the DOJ and FTC, they've yet to comment on this. This acquisition of Pat Simmons is huge because he's been in F1 for decades. He knows everything about the sport. He's worked with the governing body. He's worked with F1 itself. He knows what you need to know. He's got a lot of intel, so he can easily help Andretti in terms of getting them on the grid. It's turning into a losing battle for Formula One management. They really just need to sign and get on with it for 2026. But what this impresses upon you is that the Andretti family will right to trust their very own foam of doubt regarding their application into the sport. Sure, it's not in the most elegant way possible, but getting to see an Andretti car around Monte Carlo, just to keep it relevant to this video, is something that could easily happen and will be very much part of their history. And that's all I've got to say on it. People with foams of doubt, you've got to take them seriously, because if you don't, it will really cause problems if you're not careful. And another person who should be careful and tread lightly is Sergio Perez, because reports coming out of Mexico have your foam of doubt to hand, but if it does turn out to be true, it is a very major blow to Carlos Sainz's anti-Ferrari Grand Master plan. The claims imply that Perez has been given a one-year deal, meaning that Carlos would be left wanting for 2025. This does kind of make sense though, because so far, Sergio Perez has done enough to warrant the status quo being maintained at Red Bull. But that could easily change. We have seen mistakes creep up in recent races, and it just seems to always start at Miami, doesn't it? So it's very important that Sergio Perez has a very quiet weekend in Monte Carlo, because we don't want to see a repeat of what he did last year, where he had a major accident showing heroics into Sainte Devote, which we've been told many times not to do, and then it showcased the entirety of the RB19 floor for all to see, and that probably spurred on the development race for all of the other teams, and then they caught up at the end of the season, and we're now where we are today. So Checo, the butterfly effect, it's plain to see, so I think he'll just want to keep his head down this weekend. Perez's team reportedly clapped back with the 2-year deal, seeing him through to 2026. That means he can at least sample the Red Bull of that year, but reportedly Red Bull slapped it back and said no, offering just that 1-year deal. Ultimately, it seems like, according to Crash.net, that maybe a 1+1 deal could be arranged, similar to what Lewis Hamilton got at Mercedes and he rejected, and what Nico Hülkenberg has been going through at Haas, and also getting to make the most of the fact that Red Bull were extremely dominant, and then he can pull a Bottas, leave the team at the right time, and then they completely fall under. And as I said in previous videos, he does come with a lot of sponsors, and he does help shift a lot of Red Bull cans in Mexico. But like I said, there could easily be a fly in the ointment if Checo is not able to step up, and we see a repeat of last year, because it's a lot closer this time round. 2024 might easily see Max Verstappen getting yet another world title, because as we saw in Imola, he was able to rise above the issues of the RB20 and get the win anyway. But it does really make it clear, as people have said in the comments quite rightly, that the Constructors' Championship could be all to play for, especially if Ferrari and McLaren have two drivers who are on it and really close to each other. And even though Christian Horner has said that what happened during the Imola Grand Prix will not affect Perez's long-term status with the team, it might be brought back into matters later on if he does continue to trend down. Don't be surprised if Horner brings up Imola if things are not going well with Checo. Right now, things are fine. Things are okay. It's not looking too dangerous. Personally, I want Sergio to stick it out, and if he does have the opportunity to stay for one more year, or better yet, get that 1+1 deal. But okay, let's get back to Monaco, even though I did touch upon it with my illusions of his accident last year. Rain is expected for the weekend, but mainly for Saturday afternoon during qualifying, so we could see some surprises in the bottom of the top 10. And since this is Monte Carlo, overtaking is a rarity, and trains could easily be formed, as we saw back in 2021, when Fernando Alonso, when he was driving for Alpine, caused a monolithic train. I was looking at the map of the track, and you got the top drivers on one side of the track, and Alonso and everybody else was on the other side. So if you end up getting stuck behind an Alonso equivalent this year, say maybe Tsunoda or a Hülkenberg, you are going to have a terrifically boring time. Or, as Fernando Alonso said, if Aston Martin can't get upon their demons from Imola, and they can't qualify well in Monaco, it could be torture. Sunday is looking dry though, and not all that warm, so those with cooling issues, which could include the Mercedes, might do well. And if you think Ferrari were finished with their upgrades, you would be wrong, since they are reported to be bringing a brand new rear wing and DRS system for the track to complement their huge Imola package. And since this car is looking to address many of the issues that the original SF24 had, which include low speed corners, this could be paying dividends, because I did not see this coming, that they had yet another update. Sure, it's track specific, but it's good to have a really good loaded rear wing and a new DRS system, because last year Red Bull showed that you need to have a good DRS package. This brand new tweak could make Ferrari really competitive here, and it could give Leclerc a chance to be on the podium here for the first time and really dispel the jinx that has really befallen him. It's almost as bad as the Barrichello Interlagos jinx. By the way, I've actually heard radio from his new engineer. He's really supportive, and he likes saying good job a lot. I think this could pay really, really well for Charles and his overall psyche, not just his little puppy. And also the brand new updates seem to be leaning toward Leclerc more, which is understandable given that his teammate has been far less glowing of it, and he's seemingly deflecting his 5th place finish at Imola by saying that the upgrades were overhyped by the media. Yes, I will agree up to a point. The photographs that we saw were really plentiful, and Ferrari were really, really liberal when it came to allowing the photographers to just take a look at their brand new upgrades. They really should have kept them under wraps and really surprised us all, or tried to limit expectations. But it does really feel like Carlos is deflecting the fact that he did not really do as well as Leclerc did, as he was the one to give the Imola fans of the Emilia-Romagna region a Ferrari podium for the first time in nearly 20 years. But nevertheless, the results showed that they were closer to Red Bull, and they were able to limit the pace of McLaren's upgrades and development, so they are still living pegging. They are very much in the hunt for the Constructors' title, in my opinion. And it really helps when you hear Christian Horner saying that Red Bull really need to commit to developing the car at a steady but efficient rate, which means that we might start to see things happening where we're getting into a bit of a development war between these top 3 teams. Mercedes might do well out of this by just keeping themselves to themselves. But nevertheless, it's a slippery slope, Christian. Whilst the principle of convergence rings out, the other teams have more room to improve upon, whereas Red Bull and Adrian Newey's team got there much faster, and are seeing smaller and smaller gains in relation to their rivals. And also, with Newey putting down his sketchbook for the time being and keeping all of his thoughts to himself going into next year, the RB21 might see some of its parts being brought over to the RB20, meaning that development for 2025 could be compromised. And then, of course, we might see compromises going for the RB22 of 2026 as well, because if we get yet another development war for 2025, more time will be dedicated to that, and not 2026, which could be incredibly imperative since it's a brand new development cycle, and then they might be left on the back foot, and Verstappen might be fuming. Yeah, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. And also, I kind of want to dedicate an entire video to this topic, so be sure to subscribe to be ready for when that drops. And like I said, the battle for points could be really, really spicy for the lower teams if they can get it hooked up in qualifying. Sure, the top 7 places might be locked in for the top 4 teams, but 8th through 10th could easily be all to play for, even for the likes of Williams, if they can do well in qualifying in the rain. And according to F1 Big Data and their simulations for qualifying in Monaco, Alonso's concerns about Saturday are all the more justified, since their simulations point to Racing Bulls and Haas having the edge over Aston Martin by about 2 or 3 tenths. Yes, of course, these are simulations, so you should take them with a drop of Toto's tears, but they are quite telling and very much reflecting what Racing Bulls have been able to do, and even Haas to a certain degree. If Tsunoda and Ricciardo can repeat what they did in Imola for a second time in Q3 at Monaco, and if they can get a good start, I would find it really, really hard for anybody to get past Tsunoda, and he will be looking for revenge after Magnussen held him back in Jeddah. And speaking of getting back at people, ooh, I'm really good with these segues today. Race fans pointed out something that I not really thought about for a long time, since Alpine have got more pressing matters to attend to. That's the battle between the teammates Ocon and Gasly. The animosity could bubble over in Monaco, since last year it gave Ocon a podium in the race, and Gasly was concerned that because of that, he'll be overlooked in favour of Ocon to ensure that he has a fighting chance of getting into Q3. I do feel like Gasly is starting to get sick and tired of it, because he's been playing the team game a lot. He's been a lot more diplomatic when it comes to his comments and criticism of the team. So he would have thought that maybe the car would have been developed in his way and that the team would be thinking of him, but when you look back at what happened in Imola, you're starting to realise that that's not really the case. He feels aggrieved about what happened in FP3. He didn't get a chance to do a couple more push runs, and then he was put on a 2-stop strategy for the Imola Grand Prix, and that didn't yield results because if you do more pit stops, you can be harder on the tyres, and it led to him ending up behind Ocon, so the strategy that Alpine implemented didn't work. I do think something will happen this year if this continues. There could be easily a flashpoint, and you know what I think's really fired this up? Is because of what Audi released, saying if they couldn't get Carlos Sainz, these 4 drivers would be who we would want. And on that most wanted list are the 2 Alpine drivers. So they've got something to fight for. I mean, I think Esteban's already gone because he's looking for other teams. I think he's had enough. And Gasly, he could easily be pushed to a works team because he said that he likes to work for a works team, and Audi is a works team and they are looking really interesting, so why not? But one thing's for sure, they are both sick and tired of the fact that Alpine has only got 1 point to show, and this is getting to the point where they had a podium. And another thing that we could get sick and tired of is the Monaco Grand Prix itself. Even though the Monaco Historique a couple of weeks ago was really fun to watch over the course of the day and really showed us all that Adrian Newey is a pretty damn hand when it comes to driving and being a gentleman driver, it's starting to feel less special, and it's really not helped that Thursday practice, which made it really unique, is gone, so we've got the conventional weekend format, and now we've also got Las Vegas to consider. Yes, I know you probably have your grievances and issues with that track, but it's trying to be the Monaco of America, and I think, given time, it could easily do just that. Sure, F1 wrenching the broadcasting rights from the local broadcaster with bare hands was a step in the right direction. It did make the race look a hell of a lot faster and made Verstappen's lap look even more impressive, but I think that's only the tip of the iceberg in terms of making things more interesting for Monaco. Really, there's nothing for the casual fan. It's just a lot of rich people spending a lot of money and looking really glitzy, and the regular punter doesn't really get much of a look in, except getting a chance to be in the grandstands and maybe looking from on high in the hills surrounding Monte Carlo. There's really not much to do in terms of the fan experience close to the track. And Vegas does have that, if they do get their act together. And so long as this year they have no controversies, no foul-ups on the circuit, and we continue to see some really cool and interesting racing, especially thanks to the cooler temperatures really making the tyres all the more shaky and slippery, we might see Monaco looking really haggard and probably having to really take matters seriously in terms of making things look interesting. And I reckon a track layout change could easily occur. Maybe since they are busy making more artificial land and building more apartment blocks, maybe they could dedicate some time to extending a straight perhaps, maybe after the hairpin, going a little bit further, half a kilometre down the road, then having another hairpin, and then making the straight going into the tunnel all the longer, maybe about half a kilometre or something. That means you could have a second DRS zone there before you get the right kink in the tunnel, so that means you don't have any issues with having no downforce in a dark tunnel, and therefore it might offer some more overtaking opportunities going into the chicane. Or, if you can't do that, just make the chicane there a little bit smaller, faster. That could easily spice things up, but I think Monaco really needs to step things up if they want to keep Formula 1, because you've got to think of the entire widget here, not just the rich people, but the fans as well. And what doesn't help is that Vegas has casinos as well, and yeah, Monaco's famous for having a casino, and history. So I think it's the right time to take a cheeky punt and think about my predictions. Going into this race, I must really just look back to last year. That qualifying lap was so impressive, and that was coming from pressure from Alonso. This time around, it's coming from many more drivers and a couple of more teams. So I could easily see Max Verstappen doing the business on Saturday and doing just about enough to get ahead of everybody else, as we saw in Imola. He was very grateful that he got that pole and he was able to manage the race from there. And I feel like he'll be able to do the same at Monaco, the track, in my opinion, where he had his epiphany back in 2018 and really calmed down the whole Crashstappen branding. And really, I think he could easily get yet another Grand Prix victory here, but it's going to be close. Leclerc is going to be chomping at the bit in second place. With this brand new car, which is geared more towards him, and his desire to end his drought of podium places, having the Monegasque do well here seems all the more assured, more than ever. 2022 looked really close, and had it been not for that bad pit call, it could have been possible. So right now, it feels just right that Charles would have his opportunity to do well at the place where he was born. Lando Norris is third, and I feel like he'll be pushed into third because the men ahead of him will be wanting this victory more than him. Sure, it's nice that Lando's got his first victory behind him, but I do feel like Leclerc and Verstappen have more to prove. So I feel like unless that McLaren get a hugely great strategy done, or they can do the business in qualifying, they will be relegated to third place, but it will be a very close one at that, and I don't feel like any of the other teams below the top three will get a look in terms of the top five, which means I think Piastri will be right behind his teammate. They will probably be keeping station in terms of team orders, but then again, I do feel like Oscar has a lot to prove. Miami and Imola showed us all that if luck had been on his side, Oscar would have performed a heck of a lot more. A podium at Miami could have been possible, and at Imola, he could have easily gone for victory. He would have been on pole had it not been for Max Verstappen's good fortune in qualifying and that 3rd-place penalty which he got through McLaren not communicating with him properly. Something was taken away. Luck has really not favoured him, especially with safety cars. So if things turn out to be really fortunate for him, and he channels the luck of Ayrton Senna into his helmet design, he might get a really good solid result. But again, Leclerc and Verstappen will be wanting it more, and I feel like team orders will come into play here. He might have to hold station behind Norris. But you never know. What I think he's capable of is denying any opportunities for Carlos Sainz, who will be in 5th place yet again. I do feel like things will tense up even more. At this point of the season, the entire focus will be going on to 2025 and developing that car since they're on a roll this year. And Carlos is not going to be privy to those meetings. He is slowly going to be more and more isolated, and the team will be looking more to the Monegasque, their charge for next year alongside Lewis Hamilton, more than Carlos. He's busy trying to find a seat for next year, so therefore there's a lot on his mind. So I feel like the good form that he had at the beginning of the season will start to wane because, well, the team aren't really thinking of him too much. Of course, there is the constructors to consider, but I do feel like any good performance that we see from Carlos will have to be off of his own back and his own initiative. And we have seen it really pay dividends and getting, well, practically every single victory he's had at Ferrari, or in his entire career. It's been down to him bucking the trend. But I do feel like 5th place might be the best that he can do, especially if he ends up overdriving in qualifying and the 2 McLarens are just better. And I know I'm a McLaren fan, but I also do have a soft spot for Ferrari. I was a major fan of them back in the day when I was a kid. So I do want them to do well, but I do feel like Carlos is really being edged out here. But one thing's for sure, he'll be seeing red, and that will make for good telly. And another team that's probably seeing red or remaining green with envy is Aston Martin, as their Imola performance highlighted the discord going on with the team, which is something I elaborate on in this video here that you can go and watch right now. And don't worry, it's not me dedicating an entire video to criticizing Lance Stroll solely.